connect a Wardco R1 controller to a standard Xenotech table is that we need to switch two wires for the proximity sensor. So we need to open, it's just easier if you open this belt cover. There are no belts on this machine right now, but that's fine. And you take a 7/64 Allen wrench and remove these two screws. Gives you access to the Z terminal strip underneath, so I'm going to do that real quick. So what we're doing here is we're swapping the blue and the brown wire. So as you can see, I've got the brown wire here. The blue wire is in with the black wires here. So I've already swapped this one because y'all don't need to sit here and see my hands the whole time trying to get these little tiny wires in here. But when you pull this brown wire out of these black wires, you're going to have to pull to get a little slack to go up here to where the blue one was. And then a trick that I use, I've got a 50 thousandths Allen wrench here in my hand. When you loosen the screw here with a little flathead screwdriver, the tab doesn't bend up, it just stays down. You can take this Allen wrench and jam it in there, like so, to open that up, and it makes the wire easier to go in. And then I use needle nose pliers to hold these wires, to push them in and then tighten them down. So it's not too bad when you do it that way. Alright, we switched our blue and brown wires on our Z terminal strip. Now we need to make sure that we have our 37 pin table cable connected to the table itself, and then connected to the R1 controller, a USB cable from the R1 controller to your computer, and then the R1 controller plugged into 110 volts. You also want to make sure that you have your motor speed control plug, the cable that comes out of the back of it, plugged into 110 volts, and the auto switch set for it. Alright, so before we turn on the first time, we'll lower our Z-axis so that we can reach the limit switch here, and we want to make sure we have spring travel here so that we can test the proximity switch here before we really begin to run anything. Okay, back here at our controller, we can hit the on switch. Now I have flipped the emergency stop button here. So if it's pushed in, twist it to release it, now it comes on. So with the table sitting in a position that the y-axis is in its home position, the x-axis is in its home position, and the Z is out of its limit switch, all those lights will be lit up. Our power light, our 3 limit switches. Now what I can do just to test to make sure that our connection's working fine is I can push up to test our prox. So when I push up on it here, we see our prox light activate, so we know that's working. Another quick test that I can do is push on the Z limit switch right here, and we see that our Z limit switch is working. The X and Y's are covered with the bellows, not easy to get to, so we don't need to test those right now. Okay, so at this point, we're connected. We know that our switches are working, or at least most of our switches are working. One thing that you may try to do is use your pendant, and you notice nothing happens. The reason nothing happens is the way the R1 controller is designed. It does not function until the EDI window is open and available, and we'll show that in a minute. So at this point, don't expect your pendant to work and be able to jog things around. So we open Carpathia, and we say File, New, 4x4x4, say OK. And then to get started, I would suggest we do a rectangle. So as we drag this out, if we hold the control button, it forces it to be a square. If we don't hold control, it allows us to drag whatever shape we want. So we'll make a square. Alright, then we can right click to get out of that tool. And then we want this to be 1 inch away from the left side, so we type in 1 there, enter, and then we want it to be 1 inch down, 1, enter, because we're going to test that when we get to it. So now we can hit the F1 key or File, Output to Controller. You see the hotkey there, F1, and it's saying the R1 system controller we're going to connect. This comes up the first time we launch this when everything's new. And this is letting us know that we don't have the limit switches, everything in the software turned on yet. So what we're going to do is cancel this. Then we hit the F1 button to bring up this dialog. It's our R1 system controller dialog. So we're going to go to table setup. We're going to edit the permanent settings. So we're going to turn on all the switches. So all 3 limit switches, the procs, and the spindle. Okay, then we're going to say okay. Then we need to go back into table setup, and now we have the set table home button available. So we're going to select it, say yes. We're going to use literal values. So standard Xenotech tables are set up so the y-axis limit switch is 1 inch back from the table. We have 2 inches of travel on the Z. So we say okay. The system goes home. And then we can cancel or X out of this. And then we say apply and exit. Now, the table's already gone home once, but we can mechanical home it now. It goes through its homing process. So now we're ready to run a job. So we're going to run a diamond drag job. Alright, we have a scrap piece of material. We're going to put in the upper left corner of our table. Then we are going to set our speed and our traverse speed to 10 because we're diamond dragging. We're going to do full automatic. Our cutter lift at 0.125 is fine. Our cutter up speed, we could do 5, we could do 10. It's such a short distance it doesn't really matter. Our cutter down speed, we can select that as 3. That way we don't really slam down in the material too hard. And our spring pressure, that's just how much extra it's going to go down after the prox is triggered. We'll leave that at a small value there. So then we can say apply and exit. We can press the play button. So we check that to make sure that it's 1 inch away from the left side and the top to know that we're in the accurate location. So our measurements are good. We're up and running. We're ready to start going. Now one thing that we could do while we're here is we have our 10 speed, 10 traverse speed. We don't need an engraved delay. We can have our cutter lift, cutter up speed. So what we can do is save this as a material setting or a engraved type. So we're going to call it diamond drag. Save. So now that's in here. Now if we come back in and it's been changed to some other values, it won't show up here. Then we come in and we select diamond drag, it'll put all of our values back. And then we're ready to just hit the run job or apply and then use the pendant for play.